A Study in Scarlett. Chapter 3, Part 2. All these details I observed afterwards. At present, my attention was centered upon the single grim, motionless figure which lay stretched upon the boards, with vacant, sightless eyes staring up at the discolored ceiling. It was that of a man about 43 or 44 years of age, middle-sized, broad-shouldered, with crisp, curling black hair and a short, stubby beard. He was dressed in a heavy broadcloth frock coat and waistcoat, with light-colored trousers and immaculate collar and cuffs. A top hat, well brushed and trim, was placed upon the floor beside him. His hands were clenched and his arms thrown abroad, while his lower limbs were interlocked as though the death struggle had been a grievous one. On his rigid face there stood an expression of horror, and, as it seemed to me, of hatred, such as I have never seen upon human features. This malignant and terrible contortion, combined with the low forehead, blunt nose, and prognathous jaw, gave the dead man a singularly simious and ape-like appearance, which was increased by his writhing, unnatural posture. I have seen death in many forms, but never has it appeared to me in a more fearsome aspect than in that dark, grimy apartment which looked out upon one of the main arteries of suburban London. Lestrade, lean and ferret-like as ever, was standing by the doorway and greeted my companion and myself. "This case will make a stir, sir," he remarked. "It beats anything I have seen, and I am no chicken." "There is no clue?" said Gregson. "None at all," chimed in Lestrade. Sherlock Holmes approached the body and, kneeling down, examined it intently. "You are sure that there is no wound?" he asked, pointing to the numerous gouts and splashes of blood which lay all round. "Positive," cried both detectives. "Then, of course, this blood belongs to a second individual, presumably the murderer, if murder has been committed. It reminds me of the circumstances attendant on the death of Van Jansen in the year 34. Do you remember the case, Gregson?" "No, sir." "Read it up. You really should. There is nothing under the sun which is new. It has all been done before." As he spoke, his nimble fingers were flying here, there, and everywhere, feeling, pressing, unbuttoning, examining, while his eyes wore the same far-away expression which I have already remarked upon. So swiftly was the examination made that one would hardly have guessed the minuteness with which it was conducted. Finally, he sniffed the dead man's lips and then glanced at the soles of his patent leather boots. "Has he not been moved at all?" he asked. "No more than was necessary for the purposes of our examination. You can take him to the mortuary now," he said. "There is nothing more to be learned." Gregson had a stretcher and 4 men at hand. At his call, they entered the room, and the stranger was lifted and carried out. As they raised him, a ring tinkled down and rolled across the floor. Lestrade grabbed it up and stared at it with mystified eyes. "There has been a woman here," he cried. "It is a woman's wedding ring." He held it out, as he spoke, upon the palm of his hand. We all gathered round him and gazed at it. There could be no doubt that the circlet of plain gold had once adorned the fingers of a bride. "This complicates matters," said Gregson. "Heaven knows they were complicated enough before." "You're sure it doesn't simplify them?" observed Holmes. "There's something to be learned by staring at it. What did you find in his pockets?" "We have it all here," said Gregson, pointing to a litter of objects upon one of the bottom steps of the stairs. "A gold watch, number 97163 by Broad of London. Gold Albert chain, very heavy and solid, gold ring with Masonic device, gold pin, bulldog's head with rubies as eyes, Russian leather case with cards of Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland, corresponding with the EJD upon the linen. No purse, but loose money to the extent of £7 13. Pocket Edison of Boccaccio's Document with name of Joseph Strangeson upon the fly leaf. 2 letters, one addressed to E. J. Drebber and one to Joseph Strangeson. At what address? American Exchange, Strand, to the left till called for. They are both for the Guinean Steamship Company and refer to the sailing of their boats from Liverpool. It is clear that this unfortunate man was about to return to New York. Have you made any inquiries as to this man, Strangeson? I did it at once, sir. I have had advertisements sent to all the newspapers, and one of my men has gone to the American Exchange, but he has not returned yet. Have you sent to Cleveland? We telegraphed this morning. How did you word your inquiries? We simply detailed the circumstances and said that we should be glad of any information which could help us. You did not ask for particulars on any point which appeared to you to be crucial? I asked for Strangeson. Nothing else? Is there no circumstance on which this whole case appears to hinge? Will you not telegraph again? I have said all I have to say, said Gregson in an offended voice. Sherlock Holmes chuckled to himself and appeared to be about to make some remark when Lestrade, who had been in the front room while we were holding this conversation in the hall, reappeared upon the scene, rubbing his hands in a pompous and self-satisfied manner. Mr. Gregson, he said, I have just made a discovery of the highest importance, and one which would have been overlooked had I not made a careful examination of the wall. The little man's eyes sparkled as he spoke, and he was evidently in a state of suppressed exultation at having scored a point against his colleague. Come here, he said, bustling back into the room, the atmosphere of which felt clearer since the removal of its ghastly inmate. Now, stand there. He struck a match onto his boot and let it up against the wall. Look at that, he said triumphantly. I have remarked that the paper had fallen away in places. In this particular corner of the room, a large piece had been peeled off, leaving a yellow square of coarse plastering. Along this bare space, there was scrawled in blood-red letters a single word, Rache. What do you think of that? Cried the detective, with an air of a showman exhibiting his show. This was overlooked because it was in the darkest corner of the room and no one thought of looking there. The murderer has written it with his or her own blood. See the smear where it has trickled down the wall? That disposes of the idea of suicide anyhow. Why was that corner chosen to write it on? I will tell you. See the candle on the mantelpiece? It was lit at that time, and if it was lit, this corner would be the brightest instead of the darkest portion of the wall. And what does it mean now that you have found it? Said Gregson in a depreciatory voice. Mean? Why, it means that the writer was going to put the female name Rachel, but was disturbed before he or she had the time to finish. You mark my words, when this case comes to be cleared up, you will find that a woman named Rachel has something to do with it. It's all very well for you to laugh, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. You may be very smart and clever, but the old hound is the best when all is said and done. I really beg your pardon, said my companion, who had ruffled the little man's temper by bursting into an explosion of laughter. You certainly have the credit of being the first of us to find this out, and as you say, it bears every mark of having been written by the other participant in last night's mystery. I have not had the time to examine this room yet, but with your permission, I shall do so now. As he spoke, he whipped a tape measure and a large round magnifying glass from his pocket. With these two implements, he trotted noiselessly about the room, sometimes stopping, occasionally kneeling, and once lying flat upon his face. So engrossed was he with his occupation that he appeared to have forgotten our presence, for he chattered away to himself under his breath the whole time, keeping up a running fire of exclamations, groans, whistles, and little cries suggestive of encouragement and of hope. As I watched him, I was irresistibly reminded of a pure blooded, well trained foxhound as it dashes backwards and forwards through the covert, whining in its eagerness until it comes across the lost scent. For 20 minutes or more, he continued his researches, measuring with the most exact care the distance between marks which were entirely invisible to me, and occasionally applying his tape to the wall in an equally incomprehensible manner. In one place, he gathered up very carefully a little pile of grey dust from the floor and packed it away in an envelope. Finally, he examined with his glass the word upon the wall, going over every letter of it with the most minute exactness. This done, he appeared to be satisfied, for he replaced his tape and his glass in his pockets. They say that the genius is an infinite capacity for taking pains, he remarked with a smile. It's a very bad definition, but it does apply to detective work. Gregson and Lestrade had watched the maneuvers of this amateur companion with considerable curiosity and some contempt. They evidently failed to appreciate the fact, which I had begun to realize, that Sherlock Holmes' smallest actions were all directed towards some definite and practical end. "What do you think of it, sir?" they both asked. "It would be robbing you of the credit of the case if I was to presume to help you," remarked my friend. "You are doing so well now that it would be a pity for anyone to interfere." There was a world of sarcasm in his voice as he spoke. "If you will let me know how your investigations go," he continued, "I shall be happy to give you any help I can. In the meantime, I shall like to speak to the constable who found the body. Can you give me his name and address?" Lestrade glanced at his notebook. "John Rance," he said. "He is off duty now. You will find him at 46 Audley Court, Kennington Park Gate." Holmes took a note of the address. "Come along, doctor," he said. "We shall go and look him up. I'll tell you one thing which may help you in this case," he continued, turning to the two detectives. "There has been murder done, and the murderer was a man. He was more than 6 feet high, was in the prime of life, had small feet for his height, wore coarse square-toed boots, and smoked a trichinopoly cigar. He came here with his victim in a four-wheeled cab, which was drawn by a horse with 3 old shoes, 1 new one, on his off-fore leg. In all probability, the murderer had a florid face, and the fingernails of his right hand were remarkably long. These are only a few indications, but they may assist you." Lestrade and Gregson stared at each other with an incredulous smile. "If this man was murdered, how was it done?" asked the former. "Poison," said Sherlock Holmes curtly, and strode off. "One other thing, Lestrade," he added before turning round at the door. "Rache is the German word for revenge, so don't lose your time looking for Miss Rachel." With which Parthenian shot he walked away, leaving the two rivals open-mouthed behind him.